ecosonography really refers to a way that a designer includes an approach to working which incorporates our relationship to the world as a living system, as well as our human design. So it really is the ecological and the scenographic, or the design element, coming together. And as such, there are certain principles that underline it. It's not a style, it's not even an aesthetic, it's a form of engagement. It's very important in ecosonography, in my opinion, to accentuate possibility. And lastly, I would say that there is a cradle to cradle thinking. So you're approaching it from the point of view of the planning stage, the conceptual stage, all the way through to what I would call end of life. So very much viewing it almost as in itself as a living system. So my design for Hoax's production Stark was basically, I took upon the idea of creating a kind of immersive environment that could express the themes of ecological collapse. And it held and told a lot of the narrative of that, so that the performers themselves could come up with other ways of talking about and exploring these themes. So the kind of unique thing about it was that as the piece was about journeying, I decided to find some equipment that you would use on an expedition, and that led me to Reading Festival and to the cleanup operation, collecting a whole load of tents and sleeping bags and repurposing them into the kind of scenographic environment, an immersive environment that created a terrain through draping and crunching up these very, very extraordinary materials, actually very, very complex. And then from that, I began to some extent to articulate in a more, I would say, forthright way about how the designer can also be an advocate for change. So I began to talk about the backstory of, of how it's not only the aesthetic outcome, but how you go about creating the work, and to draw attention to some very stark facts about the materials that I was reimagining. I was given quite a loose brief in the beginning, as the piece was kind of based on Jules Verne's book, Journey to the Centre of the Earth. However, it went very far away from that. And in actual fact, it took a bit of time to create the work. So the design actually went a bit ahead of the devising process. The environment and the costumes became kind of like the world in which the devising process grew. I worked on some prototype costumes as well, and then they sort of spent whole days testing them, and you might have somebody exploring being in a sleeping bag with some amended shapes. They're hopping around, and then you realize that actually you need to make some kind of slit in the bottom so they don't fall over, and this kind of thing. So there's a kind of an evolution. And then there was a point where the second part of the costume development happened the other way around. So I had all the pieces there in the rehearsal space, and I watched them in rehearsal. I drew them as their characters developed, and we were kind of evolving, you could say co-evolving the next set of costumes. So there were more than one set. I produced the first lot, and then the second lot came from a slightly different process. Adhering to my principles that at some point these materials will need to be rehomed. I mean, I don't have an intention to discard them, and I would consider that the costumes themselves, are kind of odd sculptural pieces that certainly I would keep, or could be given to, a school, or that they can carry on. I mean, I don't feel it's appropriate having salvaged and transformed these things to discard, throw them back into the heap. And the materials themselves are multi-layered and can be reused in different ways. On another design I did, which was made of lots of different pieces as a closed loop design, it was worked at with Scenery Salvage in London, and I got everything from Scenery Salvage, and then everything went back to be broken down and reused. Younger people, or people starting out as designers, or anybody in the industry, as an overarching principle I articulated this morning, is just working with what is. That could be a material, it could be a location, it could be the cupboard in the theatre, which has got past production scenic pieces or costumes, or it doesn't always mean that you work with something that's pre-loved or pre-used. I mean, there is a lot of surplus material. For me, it's very simple. It's a commitment. It's clarifying some sort of mission statement, and it's opening up the conversations early on in the production process. It's finding out from everybody in different ways their interests. It's also noticing and not going against, I think, not being against mainstream ideas as well, because they're here, they're part of us. We're not we all consume. We're part of the whole fabric. However, we're also part of the change making. We have so much of everything that I think now to kind of, rather than keep taking, to actually see what we have, see that as an opportunity, and then use that as a springboard for creating new work and inspiring others to do the same.